What a new era of TCU athletics, TCU football we're in right now. Apparently this has become WWE. We're doing a WrestleMania style entrance right now. You know, a little bit of Charlotte Flair, HBKs coming into Amon G. Carter Stadium tonight. Adrianna, as always, co-host of the Purple Rain podcast. I am Michael Terrazas. Joined by us is a very special guest. Now, this is a guy I've been listening to for a while, so I'm trying to stay as the podcaster Michael instead of the fan, but joining us from Frogs of War, you know him from the Frogs of War podcast with Melissa Truebwasser, Jamie Plunkett. Man, what a pleasure it is to have you on the show, bud.
Well, guys, I'm just so glad you reached out and asked. It's always a pleasure to talk to Frog fans.
Hey, you know, it's actually been about a year. I'm a year late on asking you, honestly. I've been trying to get something started for TCU and finally found a great co-host and finally got it going. So, man, it is a pleasure to have you. Getting started, you know, just introducing you a little bit, man. Just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure thing. So I'm Jamie Plunkett. I'm one of the managing editors of Frogs of War. You already mentioned my incredible co-managing editor, Melissa Truebwasser. We've been running Frogs of War for about 7 years together. I've been with the site since 2011. She came on about a year and a half after that. One of the few completely free TCU fans out there. Love what we do. We got a huge following on social media, one of the biggest followings of any TCU site, with over 15,000, almost 16,000 followers on Twitter and closing in on 20,000 on Facebook. So, you can find us anywhere at Frogs of War. I'm on Twitter at Frog Preacher, just kind of doing what we do. TCU fans, from the start, and loving talking about TCU with TCU people.
There you go. And hey, they did get verified. I remember the Frogs of War account tweeted, I believe it was during like a Texas Tech game. They showed a tweet from you guys on ESPN and just verify us now, cowards, or something like that.
Right.
So, Adrianna, how was the weekend?
Pretty good. No complaints. Just back at school, which, love TCU. So
right.
Can't complain too much, but the schoolwork of it all is always, not the best, but glad to be back on campus and with everybody and lots of events going on. So it's been pretty fun already.
Well, just know Michael Terrazas, Jamie Plunkett, and TCU Nation is behind you during this time, and we are pulling for you. Okay, so getting started on the show, guys. Sonny Dykes is the new head coach, officially the new head coach of TCU football. Now, I don't want to speak for anybody, but I am really more excited about the assistants he's bringing on rather than him himself. But I just can't get enough of it. Adrianna, I'll start with you. Sonny Dykes officially named the head coach. You were there tonight at the grand entrance of it all. Tell us how the experience was and ushering in the new era.
Yeah, it was definitely quite the event. I knew that it was happening a few weeks prior. One of my friends had told me, they're going to have an event. They want everyone to be there. That's about all I know. It's the day before the tree lighting ceremony. So I knew that they were having it. So I got the email today about coming to the stadium. And so he flew in on a helicopter, landed right at midfield and came out and introduced his family's short little thing, but there's fireworks and a lot of students and fans there. So it was cool to see for sure. Definitely a lot more hype and stuff going on than I thought there would be. So it was a pretty neat event. Not gonna lie, but like I said, we've talked about this before. I'm not as hyped on the hiring, but he wrote in style, so I got to give him some points for that for sure.
Jamie, where are you on the Sonny Dykes hiring? Because the fans already know my take, Adrianna's take, but what was your initial reaction when news finally broke officially that Sonny Dykes will be named the head coach of TCU?
I think the good thing for TCU fans is they've had a lot of time to kind of process the hire at this point. Patterson left a little over 5 weeks ago now. And ever since that coaching change happened, Sonny Dykes has kind of been the name that's kept coming up and coming up and coming up. And obviously it just became official today, but TCU fans have had some time, I think, to start to process what a Sonny Dykes coaching at TCU could look like, what the team could look like, what the program could start to evolve into. I think for me, you have to do a couple things before you get into thinking about Sonny Dykes specifically. And the first thing is, I think you have to give a lot of good credit to Jeremiah Donati and the athletic director's staff and the team that was really put together, obviously hiring an outside firm to do a national coaching search, to bring in guys like Kellen Moore and Deion Sanders and Tony Elliott from Clemson and Billy Napier from Louisiana, and a couple reaching out to Chris Peterson, engaging his interest. They did their due diligence across the country, really trying to find who they thought would be the perfect fit to follow a legend in Gary Patterson. That's not an easy job to take on. And so I know that there's a segment of the TCU fan base that's probably not as enthusiastic about Sonny Dykes as they might have been about a Deion or a Billy Napier or something like that. But I think in reality, you have to ask yourself, as a TCU fan, do you want someone that's going to be here who has a high ceiling, who wants to be here potentially for the long haul? Or do you want someone that's going to be here for maybe 2 or 3 years before they use TCU as a stepping stone to the next big thing? So you kind of have to weigh your preferences there, because you can't have everything. You can't have your cake and eat it too. And you take a look at the national coaching landscape right now and the chaos of the last 48 hours, with Lincoln leaving Oklahoma to go to USC. Now you've got Brian Kelly going to LSU from Notre Dame, which means other dominoes are going to fall. You're hearing Brent Venables to Oklahoma. You're hearing Bill O'Brien to Virginia Tech. We all know that Matt Campbell and Luke Fickell are going to be brought up for the Notre Dame job as well. You have to ask yourself, are you okay with knowing who your head coach is right now, with the early signing period 16, 17 days away, versus still being in that limbo, not knowing what's going to happen with the 2022 recruiting class? And really, truly, it feels like, at least for some Virginia Tech, or if it gets to it, Cincinnati and Iowa State, they might be scraping the barrel trying to find a head coach for next year. I think TCU positioned themselves incredibly well throughout the process. And I like Sonny Dykes. He's not a flashy hire. He's not the guy that comes in with the pristine record or anything like that. But you can talk about the obstacles he faced at Cal as one of the reasons that he struggled there. And you look at this historically, tragically bad SMU program ever since the death penalty, and he has like a 700% winning percentage. You can talk about the November struggles and all of this other stuff too. But the reality is it seems like he has the ability to build a program in the state of Texas. And then you start talking about the assistants with Rashad Samples and David Grew and the defensive line coach all coming over. And you really start to see that the pieces are falling into place pretty nicely for TCU, for Dykes, and for this staff.
Oh, definitely. I hear you on all of that. I mean, from the beginning, I was already against the hire. I just didn't know what he did for you as a program that was already built by Gary Patterson. I thought you were in well position. Now I do have it on good knowledge, and I'm pretty sure you do too, Jamie. Sorry. Sonny Dykes wasn't their first option. He wasn't their first option. I want to say Billy Napier was their first. There was some good communication, but as soon as that Florida job opened up, boom, he's gone. We all know he wanted an SEC job. Former Nick Saban assistant, loves the SEC, loves that competition there, both to the SEC. So when you go to Sonny Dykes, was there real interest in Tony Elliott? What went on with Deion Sanders? It was reported by Jeremy Clark that he did interview well. What happened there? You did tell him you want to go forward with some proven coaches. So Sonny Dykes getting in with the assistants that he's coming over. Like Adrianna said, he flew in on a helicopter. We got to love him now. Grand entrance and everything. Getting into the assistants. Now, this is where I'm going to start picking up some juice, okay? Rashad Samples clearly going to be the biggest assistant that he's going to come over. Assistant head coach, running backs coach. He will be a huge force in recruiting in the state of Texas. He's proven it already tonight. Jordan Hudson, former SMU commit, just committed to TCU, a 4-star athlete. We also received another 4-star recruit from a 2023 prospect as well. So that's huge already. You're already seeing the impact. Bringing Brian Carrington over from USC, that's a blue blood program. You're leaving USC to come to TCU. People keep saying, why would anyone want to come to TCU? I got to give it to Sonny Dykes. He's built relationships. He is a good leader of men. I wanted to preface that on last week's show when I was discussing why I was against the hiring. He is still a good leader of men. Players love him. He has good relationships. He gets all the credit from me in that aspect. But Jamie, talking about the assistants that he's rolling in, I have it pulled up here. Garrett Riley, of course, people call him Baby Riley, will be coming over. He will be the quarterback's coach. He will be offensive coordinator. Rashad Samples, we discussed that. David Grew will be inside receivers coach. It has been reported by Jeremy Clark that Malcolm Kelly will stay on staff as the outside receivers coach. Mark Tomerdahl, believe I reported that or pronounced that correctly, will be special teams coach. I am actually interested in that signing as well. Defensive line coach, Chidera Uzdra. I don't want to disrespect the man by messing up his name. He is being brought over. There's still no linebacker cornerbacks coach, but Paul Gonzalez right now will be, and he is loved within the TCU program. He is loved by players. He is loved by staff. Everybody will stay on staff. Strength and conditioning coach, Kaz Kazadi, is coming over from SMU. Now, this is a signing I'm kind of iffy on. I don't want to get into it too much, but he was part of the Baylor scandal that happened, and he was actually a big part of it, not reporting the issues that was going on, just pushing it to the side, not listening to the victims, just not really caring too much. Very curious what Jeremiah Donati did. He do? I'm pretty sure he did his research on him. He's the athletic director. He's got to. That's his job. But kind of against that hiring. But Tyler Olker coming over as the director of recruiting operations. I guess you could say the ace in the hole. Brian Carrington coming over from USC, who I mentioned. Jamie, at first look, we're going to go from Jamie to Adrianna. Where are we at with this assistants that are being brought in right now?
I think when you talk about kind of the top end recruiters, especially in the state of Texas, it feels like TCU might have 4 of the top 15 recruiters in the state of Texas now. You have Carrington, who before he was at USC, he was at the University of Texas. He was their big DFW guy, right? He was one of their recruiting coordinators. He was the guy that Texas sent up to DFW to bring guys out of this area of the state and take them down to Austin. You've got Rashad Samples, who's obviously a Dallas native. Dad is a high school coach in the DFW area. He's shown his recruiting prowess over at SMU, bringing in some of the best recruits they've ever seen in their program. Malcolm Kelly, we know what he can do. He's the guy that's responsible for getting Quentin Johnson here, flipping him from Texas. He's a master recruiter. And then you got Paulie G on the other side of things. I love Paul Gonzalez. He's an incredible secondary coach. I think he's got a shot at, maybe being the defensive coordinator of this thing before it's all said and done. The guy is going incredible places before his career is over, and he's a phenomenal recruiter too. Like you mentioned, the secondary kids absolutely love him, and he was one of those critical pieces that they knew in the midst of transition. In order to keep too many guys from leaving the fold, there were guys that they were going to need to keep on, and Malcolm Kelly and Paul Gonzalez were those two. And I think you bring up a good point about Kaz. You can't ignore a person's history. You can't ignore where they've been in their past. And I think if you look at where he's been since he was at Baylor, he was at Arkansas State for a couple of years, and the athletic director there, and Kaz obviously had an opportunity to talk about his time at Baylor as well. He had some pretty interesting quotes. He's talked about his time at Baylor when he was hired by SMU, and these are programs that do their due diligence and they vet people appropriately before they hire them. And on a certain level, you have to trust that TCU is no different in doing so. But, you can't. There are some things, at least in my mind, that it's not okay to fully just let those things go and not be brought up. And when you talk about the scandal down in Waco, it was a true institutional failure, not only on the part of the football program, but really on the part of the whole university. And we saw the change that happened there after those incidents took place with the new university president, new athletic director. Obviously, Matt Rule came in and did some incredible things from a football perspective too, right out of that. So Kaz is a tough one. I would be surprised if at the press conference tomorrow it's not asked about. His history and the vetting that TCU did and getting, kind of maybe some feedback even from him on those circumstances. And, I'm all for second chances. And I also, on the other hand, think that there are just some things that are going to stick with you no matter how much you've changed or grown as a human being.
Yeah,
I think both things are possible though, right? Like you can grow and also still be held accountable.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think for me, one of the most exciting people on this list is Brian Carrington. I know we've talked about it before, but I grew up a big TCU and UT fan. I believe it was in 2018, they had like the number 3 recruiting class, but I've been able to see what he's been able to do. And I think the combination of him with Rasad Samples is going to be very effective. Especially to get this TCU recruiting class back up. Because I know last week we talked how right now, we lost a lot of people and we're pretty low on the ranking list. And then going forward too, I think we retained a lot of good coaches as well, wide receiver and defensive back. As far as Kaz goes, going along with Jamie, I think that it's difficult because it's one of those things where you can't ignore the history, but at the same time, you'd like to believe that people can grow and change. My personal opinion, I would just prefer if we went another way. I think just the handling of that entire situation was very poor. I think everyone can agree on that, but I would just, I know some people have talked like, oh, he's a really good at his job. And yeah, I can appreciate that. But at the end of the day, I think it doesn't really matter how good you are at your job if you're not going to be able to uphold certain moral values. So I think for me personally, I would just appreciate if we went another way. But like we said, I'm sure they went through processes and have had certain conversations. So and again, I'm sure they'll bring it up tomorrow and we'll hear what they have to say as far as that. But overall, I think recruiting is probably the biggest thing for me, is the most exciting coming out of this group that they released.
And I do want to say on the recruiting front, there is a lot of TCU buzz right now. There is a lot. Like, I'm just putting my ear out there. There is a lot of TCU. I'm looking at a guy right now, not going to say his name, but who could he flip to TCU? Shout out to the GOAT, Malcolm Kelly, for flipping Quentin Johnston. Jamie, I don't know if you know that. I'm not sure. I know I have it in my Twitter bio, but I live in Temple. I watched Quentin Johnston for 3 years for the Temple Wildcats. Man, that dude is a freaking beast. He announced his flip commitment on Snapchat of all places, but nonetheless, it did get out, and I am so glad he is here. Now, I do think keeping Kelly is big for keeping, obviously, Quentin Johnston here, who I think has a really, really good NFL career ahead of him. But getting into the impact of recruiting, we're already seeing it. Jordan Hudson is now here. I haven't seen an updated list about where TCU lies in recruiting, but you talk about what's being named as the best recruiting duo in the nation right now, and Brian Carrington and Rasad Samples. That is big. I mean, I've said it, Adrianna, you and I have talked about it when we've talked about head coaches who can come here. Why would they choose TCU? You're in the heart of DFW. This is where Ohio State, Alabama, this is where Michigan come to get their recruits. You have the best duo in the country, a lot of people are saying right now. You're by programs like Allen. I mean, Lord knows their freaking stadium is already bigger than possibly Baylor's. We already know that. Duncanville, you have DeSoto, you have Cedar Hill, we all know what is there. There's also probably a 3-star defensive end from Rowlett that's probably going to be committing to TCU here soon as well. When it comes to DC, now I want to focus on DC a little bit with you guys, Adrianna and Jamie. DC is, I think, needs to be a good hire because, where Sonny Dykes has been, defense hasn't really been there. It's always been offensive shootouts, offense. Only 2 names that I want. Others I will listen to, I'll analyze, I'll make my opinion. But 2 guys I want: Doug Belk from Houston and a guy whose future just got a little gloomy about maybe an hour or 2 ago, and that is Notre Dame defensive coordinator Marcus Freeman. If he does not get offered the Notre Dame job, in my opinion, which he should rightfully be given, he's earned that. If he doesn't, man, I don't know why we shouldn't make him one of the highest paid assistants in the country. Cincinnati, Notre Dame, everywhere he's gone, defenses has performed. I love this guy. I'm a Colts fan. I hate my DC. I want him to come over to Indy and be that guy for us. But if he can come to TCU, that'd be the best of both worlds. I would love to meet this guy. He seems like a cool guy to go to the bar with, take a shot, talk some football with. Jamie, let's start with you. We'll go to Adrianna. Who would you like to see as the DC?
So I'll start with who I think will end up being the DC, and then we'll start with who I'd like to see as the DC, because I don't know if it's necessarily the same person. I will say this: I have not heard Belk's name in many conversations around the TCU defensive coordinator position. I know that he's gotten some kind of cult momentum on Twitter and in a couple other places. People have seen the job that he's done down at Houston this year. But I think it's pretty likely that he does not end up as the defensive coordinator here. Freeman at Notre Dame would be an excellent hire. I think if he's not the head guy at Notre Dame, he probably follows Kelly down to LSU and kind of reinvigorates their defense down there, which needs it, frankly, after the couple of seasons that they've had without Dave Aranda at the helm. But I think a name to keep an eye on is Gillespie out of Tulsa. This is a guy who has very quietly constructed a technically sound, very imposing defense over at the Tulsa Golden Hurricanes. And, in spite of their record, you look at some of the defensive performances that they've put together in the last couple of years, especially this year, going to Norman and giving the Sooners some trouble, going to Notre Dame and keeping that game incredibly close the week before Notre Dame lost to Cincinnati. I think maybe helped Luke Fickell's coaching staff kind of put together a defensive effort to shut down Notre Dame. That's a name I think is a good one to keep an eye on. And I mentioned it earlier. I think that, I would like to see Paul Gonzalez get his shot. He's a Gary Patterson disciple. He's coached under Chad Glasgow now for a couple of years as well, 2 of the best and brightest minds when it comes not only to the 4-2-5, but just to defense in general. People really do not give Chad Glasgow the credit I think he deserves for how good of a defensive coach he is. And Paul Gonzalez has been on their hips, learning from both of them. He's a guy that players love. And I would like to see him get his shot, whether it's this year or in years to come at that position. I think that, and I totally agree with you, though. I think that the defensive coordinator hire is going to be a really critical one for Sonny Dykes because, we know TCU's whole brand is built on defense, and to fully stray away from that so quickly after Patterson leaves, I think would be a discredit to the foundation that Patterson has built here.
Yeah, especially that last part, I definitely agree with. I think today's game, a lot of people talk about it being more of an offensive-oriented game, and I think that's part of something that made TCU so special, kind of like you mentioned, is Gary Patterson's defense. And so I think we definitely shouldn't go too far from that. My number 1 pick would probably Marcus Freeman. I know, Michael, we talked off record that I have close family friend that's playing for him right now, and I've only heard great things from him and everyone in that area around him. But I think that would be my number 1 pick for sure. I think he would be awesome. Another person I would probably say, even though I know it's super unlikely, is Brent Venerables. I know there's big talks about him going to OU, but I know when we were first talking about the head coaching position being open at TCU, that was someone that I wanted. If we were to stay with a defensive coordinator as a head coach, like I said, very unlikely, but thought I'd just put him out there because definitely would like to see that for sure.
Hey, Brent Venables is due for a head coaching job. Okay, he is big time due. He don't need to be a coordinator or an assistant anymore. Go take the OU job, get in the SEC, get your money and get walloped. I'm not sure what he's going to do for the offense. We'll wait to see how that goes. But getting into just a quick update for you guys. I'm not sure if whoever's been living under a rock hasn't found out by now. Unfortunately, Zach Evans is expected to enter the transfer portal. This is a big blow. It is a big blow. He is going into the transfer portal. That is the expectation right now. And, it's unfortunate. It sucks, definitely, but his relationship with Gary Patterson was a huge reason why he was even at TCU in the first place. I know he sounded off on Twitter saying we want Deion Sanders. He also has a relationship with him as well. So some kind of felt around the program if it didn't really go with, keeping Gary Patterson or getting Deion Sanders that he would leave. It's coming to fruition that he is leaving now. Kendre Miller is now the guy. I don't know if he'll enter the transfer portal. I haven't heard anything about him going. I can't even see him going now that he is the guy. Just had a 1,000-yard rushing year. Still a very good back. Going forward, guys, looking at some of the holes that you may have on the offensive line, you have two scholarship running backs now, Kendre Miller, DeMarque Foster. Do you keep Watkins at running back? Who knows? He filled in because of injury issues. Where are we going to go? Where do you expect Sonny Dykes to go? Do you expect him to test that transfer portal that he was brought here because he knows how to navigate, and he has shown that ability to navigate, and possibly bringing in some wide receiver help, defense help, maybe at safety, corner? Maybe it's looking bleak there with Noah Daniels possibly going to the NFL. What are we looking at? Adrianna, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I would say definitely reliance on the transfer portal for sure. I remember when we first started talking about this position being open, that was one of our criticisms with him, just because the difference in in conferences, we're just talking about the success that other people have had going into his conference, and we didn't know if he would be able to do that same thing in the Big 12. I say he definitely does rely on the transfer portal and use that expertise like we talked about. And that's one of the things that he came here for and was brought in for, because he knows how to navigate that. And I think that's definitely a good option, especially now with so many coaching changes. A lot of people are getting shuffled around, and I'm sure we're going to see players either leave because of coaching changes or leave to follow other coaches. So I think that definitely leaves a lot of players out in the open just to pick up. And I think he should definitely capitalize on that opportunity.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, if you look at the roster that he constructed at SMU, there are 15 Power 5 transfers on SMU's roster this year because of Sonny Dykes. And they're coming from Oregon and from USC and from Oklahoma and from some big blue blood programs who trusted him with the second chapter of their collegiate careers. And I think that when you look at the college landscape now, especially with the reality that Oklahoma and Texas are leaving the Big 12 soon, you can look around the Big 12 and ask yourself, well, who's going to fill that void? And sure, Cincinnati's having a miracle run this year, but I think the reality is that TCU is the best positioned program of the future Big 12 to be the powerhouse. And so that is going to play, I think, a huge role into Dykes' ability to get kids to transfer in this transitional period. Transfers are always going to happen in transition, kind of like Adrianna said. But I think it's critically important to get the right guys into the program too. You know, skill position isn't going to be an issue for TCU to recruit. We've seen that, right? Zach Evans came here. Kendra Miller is here. Quentin Johnson, Jalen Rager, Josh Doxson, right? Like the list goes on and on and on of skill position guys that have come here. The question is, how is Dykes going to transform the offensive and defensive lines? Are we going to bring in some older guys to kind of fill in some of those gaps? What's that recruiting going to look like? AJ Ricker is a guy who's coming over from SMU as the offensive line coach, and Cheeto as well on the defensive line, two guys that have been known to recruit pretty well and coach really well. That's where I'm going to be really interested to see how Dykes plays the transfer portal versus putting together classes for 2022 and 2023 is what do the trenches look like? Because, you know, as three TCU fans sitting here having a conversation, we all know the offensive line has struggled in the last couple of years. And if anything's going to change, that needs to change first.
I'm with you guys. I'm with you guys. I think there does need to be a little bit of flip of talent on TCU. Like we've said, Adrianna, there have been some holes. There's been some struggles, definitely some obvious struggles here on the offensive line. But I definitely think, like James said, and you said as well, that there's going to be inevitable change when there's a switch. So where do you navigate from here? Where do you go from here? And it's interesting that you did say Joseph Gillespie, Jamie, because I do like what Tulsa has done, especially how they've developed a good buddy of mine, Jackson Player, the defensive tackle for that defense. I do like what they've done, and that'll be interesting to go forward. And to be possibly, hopefully, the new powerhouse in the new Big 12. You know, Desmond Ritter's not going to be here when they get to the Big 12. You know, Ahmad Gardner, who I love, Jesus, I love him. He is not going to be here. So Cincinnati coming over. We'll see. We'll see about that. I do agree. Maybe TCU or Oklahoma State is the best position program to take over. What about Oklahoma State, guys? That was an amazing game to watch, even though it hurt to not be in the Big 12 championship. But what a game, I just got to say. So moving on to our last segment, we're going to switch gears, actually. We're switching big-time gears here. We're going to get with basketball, okay? I know we all probably go to the hoops, the YMCA, the rec center, you know, cross a few ankles, drink a couple Gatorades, and go home after a big win. But this is going to be TCU College Basketball, all right? They stand currently 5-1. They just beat, where Jamie's coming from tonight, they just beat, who was it, Austin Peay?
Austin Peay, yeah.
Yeah, Austin Peay. They beat them 68-51. They do have that one loss, which came to Santa Clara. Are they going to be good? I don't know. But for TCU, let's jump into it, guys. Jamie, I'm going to defer to you because I've been focused all on football. Now that the football season's over, now I'm going to be able to switch to basketball and watch those games consistently. Talk to us, man. Where is the basketball team at right now? How have they performed, and how do you expect them to compete moving forward and in the very, very tough Big 12?
I think that's a good question. So difference of this TCU basketball team versus teams of TCU past that we've seen recently, the first thing that you're going to notice right out of the gate is that this is a bigger, longer, more athletic, more physically imposing basketball team. They had 8 guys transfer in this offseason, and obviously 9 guys transfer out as well. So it's a roster of new faces. Jamie Dixon is working on figuring out the rotation that works best. But there are a couple guys that I think really TCU fans need to latch on to right now, and that's Memphis transfer Damian Baugh and Texas A&M transfer Emmanuel Miller. These are 2 guys who have come in. They're starting now for the Frogs, and they are long, athletic, defensive-minded guys who are also incredibly efficient scorers. And they have, in just 6 games, really kind of transformed the kind of team that TCU is. You know, you think about TCU basketball, you think about an offense that is really dependent on one guy being able to create a lot. You know, we talked about Desmond Bain, we talked about RJ Nembhard and Mike Miles last year, and kind of coming into this year, Mike Miles was assumed to take on that role. And then you're also talking about a team that's somewhat undersized, not much of a post presence, struggling on the boards. that kind of thing, struggling defensively. TCU already has 2 games this season where they've rebounded more than 50 balls in one game, right? They had 51 rebounds tonight against Austin Peay. They had 53 against Southern Miss a couple of weeks ago. And that's one of the things that Dixon really is proud of for this unit, is that they are crashing the boards really hard. Eddie Lampkin, who's quickly becoming a fan favorite as well, was talking tonight after the game. He had his first career double-double, 12 points, 12 boards, 51 total rebounds for the Frogs. He was like, me and Emmanuel Miller and Xavier Cork and all these. He's just like listing basically the whole team. He's like, we talk every day about how we can get better at rebounding. We talk every day about how we can lock down on defense. And we know that that's going to get the offense going. This is a team that has struggled offensively a little bit, especially early in games. They got behind against Santa Clara. Santa Clara shot the lights out. They shot like 70% from 3 that game. And you're just not going to catch up to a team if you get behind and they're shooting hot like that. That's just not going to happen. Santa Clara is probably a fringe tournament team this year too. So we'll see what that loss looks like down the road. But really, this is a basketball team that is going to be more athletic and more competitive than we've seen in years past. Now, what does that mean for the Big 12? I don't really know, right? It's such a competitive conference that you have to look at it in terms of, all right, well, who has TCU caught up to? You know, I think it's safe to say they've caught up at this point to Iowa State and Kansas State. Right? Then who's the next team that you can catch up to? Maybe it's Oklahoma State, right? And then who's the team after that? Is it Oklahoma?
Probably Oklahoma now.
Maybe it's, because at that point you're talking about Oklahoma, Texas, Texas Tech, Baylor, Kansas.
Yeah.
Right. Those, and West Virginia. So Oklahoma's maybe the next one. And then it's teams that are, annually in the top 25. And so when we think about TCU basketball progress, I don't know that from a standings perspective, it might not look much different this year. They might finish, my guess is maybe around 6th, 7th in the Big 12, also a fringe tournament team. But I think you're going to see a team that is in a lot more closer games than they have been in years past. They're going to rebound a lot better. And this is a defense that is going to give even really good offensive teams quite a lot of problems throughout the season, especially in conference play.
Yeah, this summer, Mike Miles participated in the USA U19 team, and you could definitely tell a difference. I think that you can tell that he has a lot more confidence and probably like control on the court. I honestly haven't been able to watch them too closely. I've been pretty focused on college football right now, but also I know Eddie Lampkin's gone in shape this offseason. That's one of the big things that he's been talking about. And then as far as like on the student side, which is probably like a little bit different perspective, but I know Jamie Dixon's been making like a lot of more effort to get students involved. And I think that's something he's always done a really good job of. But I know this year already, there's been like a big emphasis on trying to get more students in attendance and get more people behind the basketball team. So that's been really good. I think that's definitely going to have an effect, especially for home games when we start Big 12.
Hey, the OGs remember the Trent Johnson, the Kion Anderson days. We remember those. We are not there anymore, guys. Right now, the TCU Horned Frogs stand at 5-1. I love the fact rebounding is big. The past, Kenrich Williams isn't here anymore. He's in the NBA doing his thing, obviously. Vladimir Brodziansky. I mean, we can go back and forth about the rebounding, but love me some Mike Miles. Also love me some Micah PV, Duncanville product. I also like him a lot. I am still going to keep studying this basketball team because I have been heavy. I'm also covering the Colts, heavy in that right now, but definitely now going to have a lot more time to study this basketball team. I'm ready for the tournament. I don't know about you guys. Final Four national championship, here we come. Can they get there? I don't know about right now, but all I know in the future, Houston, Cincinnati, UCF, those are good basketball programs coming over.
Don't discount BYU either. They've got a pretty solid basketball program. This is the one sport where you look at the Big 12 and you can say definitively they're getting better by adding 4 teams and getting rid of Texas and Oklahoma, which is wild.
Yes. which is very wild. This isn't football. This is basketball. Kansas brings in big money. Baylor, defending national champions, brings in big money. So I'm pulling for the tournament, obviously, but rebounding is going to be big, especially in the Big 12. You know, there's good bigs in the Big 12. You know, we all remember those days in Texas. Adrianna, you remember Cameron Ridley at Texas, Joel Embiid from Kansas. You got Azubuike from Kansas, who's gone on now. So it's going to be big, but we will have more TCU basketball coverage. If there's any more updates about the staff moving forward on the football side of things, we'll bring that to you as well. But guys, before we get out of here, I got one question. One question before Championship Saturday. Who is your Final Four? I had to bring it up. I didn't want to let y'all know beforehand. I had to put y'all on the spot. Jamie, I'm going to go with you first.
Well, I think it's going to be a really fun Championship Saturday. Georgia's obviously sitting there at number one. Their defense is arguably the best defense I've seen in 20 years of keeping up with college football. They allowed 9 touchdowns this year, right? Like, that's wild. So Georgia's sitting there at number one. Right now, ahead of Championship Saturday, whatever. I think I've got Michigan at number 2. That win over Ohio State was very impressive. They've got a running back that can just absolutely tote the rock. He had 5 touchdowns against Ohio State. Dominant. They have that one loss to Michigan State in a rivalry game that was incredibly close. Michigan State had to score late to win that football game, I do believe. And you can excuse a close loss in a rivalry game when you've got a team like Michigan that's just finally clicking on all cylinders, it feels like. At number 3 right now for me is Cincinnati. I think they've done enough at this point to prove their worth to the committee. They went into South Bend and beat a Notre Dame team that is phenomenally good. They have a great record against their conference mates, which, you can only TCU fans know this intimately well. You can only control your conference so much. And so they've taken the slate of games that they were given and they won every single one of them. So what else can you really ask a team to do? And at number 4 for me, and this is probably going to be the controversial pick, it's Oklahoma State. We watched them absolutely feast on TCU just a couple of weeks ago, but more impressive than that was the defensive effort in the second half of Bedlam on Saturday night. They didn't allow an offensive touchdown from, I think, the 3rd minute of the second quarter on in that game. And you're talking about a Lincoln Riley offense where that offense just got Lincoln Riley paid $11 million a year for the next decade and a $6 million house bought for him in LA by USC. Mm-hmm. Right. So Gundy has, and this is where I think Gundy has been able to adjust to the new college game, where he has taken on a more CEO style role in that coaching offense or in that coaching staff. He's brought in a defensive coordinator who has established themselves in the last couple of years as being a real force on that side of the football. And it all came to a head on Saturday night in Bedlam. And, I think they're the number 4 team in the country right now. They're going to have a chance to prove that in the Big 12 championship by beating the tar out of Baylor, which I'm desperately hoping for.
Yes. Adrianna, where are you at?
Yes. Okay, this is terrible, but I would say I'm probably the exact same as Jamie, just because Georgia, number 1. We saw Alabama. Obviously, they beat Auburn, but they really struggled against them and nearly lost. I think it was by the end of regulation. They almost only had like 3 points. Obviously, at the end, they won, but I just don't think that they're as dominant this year. So I think Georgia's 1. 2, Michigan, kind of like you were saying, we saw them destroy Ohio State, and I think that definitely just made a big statement going into this next weekend. 3, Cincinnati. I think that just in general that they've shown enough that they can get wins. I think Desmond Ridder is a little kind of, in my opinion, like a little streaky. He can be very on or off, but when he's on, he's really, really good. And I think that going forward, he's going to have the right mentality. So I would say 3 for them. And I know on last week's podcast, I did say that, or 2 weeks ago when we talked about this, I did say that I thought Oklahoma State had a really good chance of sneaking into the top 4 if they won Bedlam and the Big 12 championship. So I still stand by that. If not them, I would say maybe Notre Dame, just because their loss is to Cincinnati. But I know I've said in the past that I ruled out Notre Dame like immediately just because of their past history of getting to the bowl game or even the playoffs and just getting destroyed because, they don't have a conference and they don't really have that statement to prove themselves. But I think that if it's not Oklahoma State, it will probably be them. And again, we've talked about this, but it's kind of like a history and ratings game. And we've seen it before, but Notre Dame always sneaks in there somehow. So I wouldn't be surprised if they get in there.
In this year's college football playoff, I'm sorry, a non-conference champion Notre Dame cannot get in the playoff. I'm sorry. That's my big pet peeve for this year. Now, where I would go right now, before we see the rankings tomorrow, we're going to see a lot about what the committee thinks about Oklahoma State's win over Oklahoma. We're going to see where they think about Baylor squeaking by Texas Tech. We're going to notice a lot of that, and I swear to Jesus, if Ohio State is in the top 4, I'm gonna be pissed. Georgia number 1, Michigan number 2, Cincinnati number 3, Alabama number 4. Now this is before championship Saturday. Alabama loses, and if Oklahoma wins 2 weeks in a row, you beat 2 top 10 teams and you got a conference championship. How do you not put Oklahoma State over Alabama in the playoff? How do you not do that? It is such a beautiful change of pace, too. I mean, all this, it's always Georgia, Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson. Now we're getting Georgia, Michigan, old khaki pants, Cincinnati, Luke Fickell, Desmond Ridder, and Adrianna, you mentioned the quarterback. I'm big into the draft. No quarterback is getting a first-round pick from me, a first-round grade from me this offseason. I can tell you that now, but I love Desmond Ridder. For Oklahoma State, that defense is legit. They're physical, and when do you ever see Oklahoma's offensive line get manhandled like that? You don't, and that's what Oklahoma State, man. Shout out Malcolm Rodriguez. That is one hell of a linebacker. Definitely made a note of him to watch during the offseason of getting ready for the draft. Come to the Colts. Yes, sir. Georgia, Michigan, Cincinnati, Oklahoma State. I would love that playoff. I love competition. Good defenses from all 4 teams. Offenses, Michigan can be streaky. Cincinnati, like you said, Adrianna, can be streaky. Oklahoma State, Spencer Sanders, those legs, freaking Warren, the physicality. It is going to be a great championship Saturday. I'm going to kick back, watch the Big 12 championship game. I'm going to watch, I don't even know if I'm going to watch the SEC championship game, honestly. I don't know. I'm going to be waiting for the Big 10. Michigan, do not screw this up. Do not. Because if you lose, all chaos, total chaos. It's going to happen. So, guys, that is another edition of the Purple Rain podcast. As always, once again, Jamie Plunkett from Frogs Award, thank you for taking the time. I know it was a little bit of a late night covering TCU basketball. Thank you for taking the time to jump on the show once again, man. After 4 or 5 years of listening to you, finally able to talk TCU with you, man. It was a pleasure. It was a privilege. Thank you, man.
It was my pleasure to be here, guys. Anytime you want to chat TCU, I'm down.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Well, guys, she is Adrianna Orojo. He is Jamie Plunkett from Frogs of War at Frog Preacher on Twitter. If y'all want to give him a follow, check out their articles, website, podcast, all that stuff. The #1 sports blog for TCU out there. I am Michael Terrazas. Thank you again. We'll see how Championship Saturday goes, guys. Stay sober, please, for the love of God. See you.